Well, one forum down, one to go. Tomorrow the Jobs Forum opens in Canberra, following on from the two-day tax roundtable that ended this evening. The result, a working group headed by the chairman of the Board of Taxation to look at how business can be tweaked to help those in the slow lane of the economy. The government also says it's considering extending the tax-free threshold to $21,000. That would benefit low-paid workers who the forum heard are missing out on many of the benefits in the tax system. Political correspondent Tom Eagleton reports from Parliament House.
It was the recently anointed world's best treasurer's turn to dish out the praise for a forum he organised.
What I regarded as one of the best discussions I've seen in a forum of this type in the whole time that I've been in politics.
And he's keen to keep the talk up now the roundtable's been packed away.
So what the government will do is ask Chris Jordan to chair a business tax reform working group.
And he wasn't done there.
The Commonwealth will contribute $1 million per year to create an independent tax studies institute.
Much of today's discussion was about how to get the rich to pay a greater share of tax to address the widening wealth gap.
Negative gearing, trusts, excessive salary sacrifice, FBT on cars, those things have brought tax avoidance techniques to the heart of Australia. And I think we need to wind them back.
Others argued the tax system was encouraging unsustainable economic choices among those struggling to keep up with the rising wealth of their neighbours.
US experience, among others, shows that people will tend to borrow in order to sustain levels of consumer spending in the face of stagnant incomes, and that was one of the factors leading up to the financial crisis.
Mr Estlake pointed to negative gearing as an example of a rule that distorts the economy. It costs the tax system, he says, $4.5 billion a year, encouraging people to buy a second property when they don't need one.
There are now 1.7 million of them, and they vote, which is why that subject is off the agenda for both major political parties. But there is no legitimate policy objective served by allowing people to do that.
Were it not for negative gearing, that many investors could not or would not afford to invest in property, you would find that developments wouldn't proceed, shortages would increase and be aggravated, and so rents would increase.
It's simply not true, as advocates of negative gearing say, that the brief suspension of it in the mid-1980s led to a surge in rents, no matter how often the defenders of that say it.
There was also an attack on the rule that allows over 60s to avoid paying tax on superannuation income.
Around 40% of the tax breaks on superannuation go to the top 5% of earners. To me, it is one more baby boomer party that will be over by the time my generation gets to retirement, and eventually the matter will need to be dealt with.
The big problem is that as the proportion of the population aged over 60 or 65 increases, the cost to revenue of those unjustified concessions will only escalate.
In his closing remarks, Wayne Swan ignored the negative gearing debate and said he'd talk to the superannuation industry about its tax arrangements. But he says the government's thinking about further increasing the tax-free threshold to benefit low-paid workers and closing loopholes that only help the wealthy.
Identifying loopholes is not necessarily seeking scapegoats or class warfare or anything like that. It is making our tax system fairer and more efficient.
The opposition says the tax forum's a waste of time. It says it wasn't invited, though the government insists it was. Either way, the Liberals staged a mini tax forum of their own today. Backbencher Jamie Briggs said the GST should be put on food, though Tony Abbott reminded him that's not Liberal policy. Tom Eagleton, Late Line.